The total number of people that actually took the class is where you add 64 and 18 together.
Okay, so the next column.
So this
has
is
nothing to do
72.
with that?
Are you recording?
So then the total number of people that didn't take the class, you add those two together.
Is it Anna? Is it Anna?
Why is there no people in class?
Okay, let's go back. This is 82.
Is 82?
Okay, let's talk about how many people actually passed, whether they took the class or not. So that's the 64 plus the 48. 112?
Yeah.
And then the failed
Yeah.
would be 18 plus 32.
50.
And so then the total is,
160.
so the total number of people we're talking about is 162. Okay? Now, the tables that you have won't always have room for you to write the totals. Okay? But you should write the totals first. If the totals aren't given to you, and if there's not room, you still need to write the totals, because the totals is what's going to help you find the answers to the questions. Okay? So, the probability that a student passed, we're talking about of everybody that, in the whole entire study, how many people passed and what's the probability that you would pass. So, what's the number of people that passed total? 112. What's the total number of people that we're looking at in the study? Questions about that? Okay, next. It says probability a student didn't take the class. Okay, if a probability a student didn't take the class, so how many people didn't take the class? 80. The 50 is how many people failed. And then how many total people are we looking at?
162.
Okay. All right, next is something called conditional probability. And with conditional probability, it's a weird notation, but this is the notation: probability of A given B. That little line that's going straight up and down is called given. And you might see it written that way, or it might be written in words like that next question, but we'll talk about it. There's a rule for it. Probability of A and B over probability of B. Okay?
What line? Oh, the thing in the middle of A and B? Oh.
That particular formula, you can memorize the formula and use it if it helps you. Okay? Or I can just kind of show you using this table how you find that information using the table. So, depending on that final test, I don't know how they're going to give you the information, if they're going to give it to you in a table or words or whatever, but the table is really nice because you don't have to know that formula, and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so the first question says, find the probability a student passed given that they didn't take the class. Alright, it says, given that they didn't take the class. You always start with that part of it. The part that says given, start there. Okay? Now, I usually, with my fingers, mark off the parts that doesn't matter. Okay? I'm going to, mark it off with the marker right now so that I can show it to you. But it says, given that they didn't take the class. What that means is that I'm only looking at not taking the class. Okay? So it's like I'm not looking at that and I'm not looking at that. I'm only looking at that middle column based on what they said about the given that. Does that make sense? That's how you start it. You start with the given and you mark off and don't look at anything else. And then it says, find the probability a student passed. So if I'm only looking at that column, how many passed? 48. And how many total were there in that particular column?
80.
Questions about that? Okay. Y'all have to help me with the totals again whenever I come back, but we'll look at it. Okay, so the next question says, a student failed given that they took the class. Okay? We're looking at the given that again, given that they took the class. Alright? So that means I'm only looking at the class. So that means I'm not looking at any of that. Okay? So failed would be 18. And then the total is the total that was right here, 82. So the totals will change depending on what column or what row you're looking at. Okay, number 3 says, find the probability a student didn't take the class given that they failed. Okay, so I'm only looking at the failing. So this time we're looking at rows. I'm not looking at that, and I'm not looking at that. I'm only looking at that middle row. Okay? Then it says, so I start with the given that, look at whatever I'm looking at, and it says probability a student didn't take the class. So how many didn't take the class? And how many total are there? 50. Because you're only looking at that one row. Got it? Okay. What I need to do is I need to figure out all the totals. Okay. You can fill those in. I'm going to write down what they were. That 818, it should equal that whether you go down or across. Like the number should be correct both ways. If not, then you know you added something wrong. All right, the first question says, the probability that it's a member of a club, given that he is a male. Okay, so we start with given he's a male. Okay, so where's the male? Are we looking across or are we looking up and down? We're looking across because we're looking at male, so we're only looking at that one row. Okay, so what's the total going to be that goes on the bottom of it? Okay, so then go back. The member of a club, what's the probability that he's a member of a club when I'm only looking at that one row? Okay, number 2 says probability not a given probability that it's not a member of a club given that she is female. Okay, so start with the female part. So am I looking at a row or a column? Row, because it says female. Okay, so what's the total that's going to go on the bottom? If I'm only looking at that one row, 420. And then not a member of a club.
I thought it was 350.
Okay, let's do another one. The male, given that he's not a member of a club. So this time I'm looking at not a member of a club. So this time I'm looking at this column. So what goes on the bottom?
398. 350.
And then you go to male. How many are males in that column?
I did that one right.
All right, this last one, probability of, and this is notation, and the reason I wrote the notation is because on the sheet that you'll be looking at, there will be a couple problems written this way. Instead of in words, they're going to write it this way. Okay?
Oh, no.
The second thing is the given still. So that part right there means only look at clubs. So I'm only looking at clubs. I'm only looking at that one column. Okay? So what number would go on the bottom if I'm only looking at clubs? Okay. Then I want the probability of female. How many females do we have? And so that's how you do that one. So if they write it in letters, it's the same as the words, but you just have to know what that notation means. That little line means given, so the second thing is always given.
So female club.
Hey, and I bet you're just eating chicken nuggets and laying in bed.
Do you want to hear my Australian accent? Crikey!
Well, she did.